Over to you, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sarah, great to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. Today, we're going to try and help you understand something that's new, something that's out there, and something that we've been working on in the background now for nearly 7 years. And finally, we've got to some marketplace and market share. So my background is an exercise and sports physiotherapist, and we're going to talk about MSD risk analysis. Historically, we used to do them manually. We used to do manual assessments in a manual tasks. So what we've tried to do is modernize that, and we're going to discuss that. So hence we're using data that is driven from these analysis. This whole system is born out of research. It began with a research and development grant through the Australian Colon Research Project, and we did a 2-year project at BHP in 2015 and 16. And it's taken a while for us to get to a product that is viable, validated, reliable, and functional. So it looks good, nice to use. So that's where we're at today. We know that to assess MSDs in the workplace, it can be a bit tricky. So they're difficult, they're time consuming, they're subjective, they're unreliable, and they're often done by so-called experts. And what does that often mean? They'll come into your workplace, they'll interrupt your workflow. And part of the challenge that we're now seeing with these task assessments is that they're often done by people with different backgrounds. So whether you be an occupational therapist, whether you be a physiotherapist, and more commonly we're now seeing exercise physiologists doing these in the workplace, or an ergonomist. Up there is the Australian Code of Practice Risk Score, and that's what we use as a baseline. So we can see that assessing MSDs has historically been difficult, challenging, time-consuming. So how do we improve that process? Well, we'd educate people. We'd get the so-called subject matter experts to come into a workplace and do these assessments. We would look at injury history, we'd look at claims history, we'd review the hazard profiles. So what does this mean? We'd use tools, we'd use processes, and we'd use people. And why do we do this? Because we know it's not easy to assess risk within physical tasks. It's hard, we all acknowledge that. Key point is we cannot efficiently assess all hazardous manual tasks with a manual assessment. It's difficult, and that's why we had to do all these people's processes and tools to try and improve the process. So what do we currently do? Well, we'd review all these things. We'd talk to a worker, we'd talk to the health and safety team, we'd try and look at hazard reviews, we'd look at injury reports and claims, and we'd discuss near misses. A lot of this tells you it's a reactive process. So we're responding to what's happening. So we are always chasing our tail. It's not proactive, it's reactive. So what we need to do, is there a new way? And yes, there is a new way to do manual task assessments. The new way is automation of this process. So at Joint Action Solutions, through our research project, we use 5 small wearable sensors. So they're strapped onto the body at the head, the upper back, 2 above the elbows in the lower arm, and 1 in the low back. The sensors are basically about your thumb size. So they're about half your thumb and they're small, and we put them into a little device that keeps them snug, and then we strap them onto the body. So they're not connected to the body. The advantage of this is we're getting accurate, reliable, objective, and we're getting an immediate analysis and report. It's live. You can actually look at this. You can get a report, and then you can act on it there and then. You download an app from the App Store, and often we record them on our iPhone because that's a bit easier to use in a workplace than a larger iPad. And if you remember, like any app, if it's on your iPhone, it's on your iPad, and so you can use the iPad as sort of reviewing as on the go when you're at the work site. It's important to understand that we are assessing the task. We are not assessing the worker. So it is an automation of manual task risk assessment. So what we're trying to do is stop haptic management. Haptic management is an example of that, is manual handling training. So coaching, those things are not hazard management. They're guidelines. Hopefully this will reduce things, but we can now stop the hope process. We can have that reliable, objective data. If you look at this capture from the iPad screen, so you'll get a reading on the neck, the back, and the arms. So they're the three contributing regions to the risk score. So at the top right-hand side in the orange, it says 103.5. So that's telling you that's a substantial risk, and that's based on the code of practice. So we're using technology to gain better risk controls. Remember, they're quick, it's accurate, it's reliable, objective, and instant feedback. It's sort of, if we want to understand work-related MSD risk, we need to manage it, and to manage it, we need to understand it. And that's a challenge in the workplace, and has always been a challenge. That's why we've adopted a new system, a new process. That's why we did a research project. We thought there's got to be a better way. There's got to be an alternative to what we're currently doing, because we have not reduced claims, costs, injury rates around MSDs in workplaces for 30 to 40 years. We've made no difference with the old hat approach, haptic management, manual handling training. We haven't changed things. So there needs to be a better way for us to assess manual handling tasks, and this is it, automation. So we've got to stop that reactive process. We can now have an upstream model of care. We can actually have a prevention focus. One of the really nice things once we've done these assessments is we can then reassess. So we can actually try and put some risk controls based on the information you've got from that objective assessment. Then what you can do is reassess. So we can assess and reassess, and you can get changes very quickly by using objective data. One of the really nice things too is you don't need your OT, physio, ergonomist, or exercise physiologist on site. It can be anyone within your health and safety team. So non-experts can use this technology to perform the risk assessments. And the nice thing is that human element, that guesstimation, I think this might be the problem. Well, we're eliminating that. So the potential biases associated with the individual's training and their education are eliminated. It's gone. So now we have an accurate, reliable prevention focus. So this is an example of once we've done an assessment, there's two icons on the report page, and we click on the top right and we can get what are the contributing factors in the detailed assessment component of a task. If we have a look at this, the green is okay. So if you look, there's three greens, so neck and shoulders, and that's okay. But you'll see there's a yellow icon at the low back. And what this is showing is the low back score is 66.5. So the back region is the major contributor, or the loads to the back are the major contributor to this risk score. We can then reassess them, trying to change some of the loads that are experienced by the low back. Remember, in a manual assessment, we would say, we'd film the person, oh, okay, they're bent at 20 to 45 degrees and they hold that position for 20 to 30 seconds. That would give us this risk score. And then we would then break it down and keep looking at that whole task and repeat that whole process. Look at the neck, look at the low back, look at the shoulders, and then add it all up to get a total risk score for that task. This is now all automated. What we've done is create an algorithm from the code of practice, and we've dumped it. So that's what we'll say our research project was it then creating the algorithm based on the Australian Code of Practice for hazardous manual handling. So we've automated that process. So you don't have to now count. You don't have to see how much movement. You don't have to work out, is it sustained or repetitive, or is it both? It's all automated. So this, therefore, is giving you meaningful data that you can then help make decisions around. So that's where the phrase data-driven decisions come from. It's creating data that you can use, that you can then try and put a risk control in place based on the data that you've gained, and then you will reassess to see if your risk controls are lowering the risk score. So that's what I was just saying there. So it's defined by the Hazardous Manual Task Code of Practice, Safe Work Australia, 2016 and 18. So it's not numbers or theories that we've pulled out of a hat or a bag. We have got that whole manual assessment process and automated it. And then what we're doing is using standardized methodology for consequence damage weighting based on the Australian work-related MSD injury claims data. So the human element is removed. We're standardizing the assessment. That's the really nice thing. We've created an algorithm, we've standardized the assessment. So if you looked at the same task and are assessed it 10 times, you'll get the same outcome because you've removed all that human elements that lead to inconsistencies and therefore potential you've missed the boat. You haven't actually addressed the thing that needs to be addressed. You haven't made a difference. With this, we're stopping that so that all those biases, all those things that you thought might make a difference, no, it's now become objective, it's become accurate, it's become reliable, and it's all based on Safe Work Australia's 2016 and 18, and like international standards for risk factors as defined by the hazardous manual task codes. So it's important that you understand that this is an algorithm that took years to create. It wasn't just an overnight thing, but it took years to create through our research project. And it's making, it's been great with respect to getting better risk controls within organisations. Look, we want to, in every workplace, our whole, what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to do? We want continuous safety performance improvement because we need to identify and quantify the risk elements of all hazardous manual tasks. That historically has been really difficult and challenging to do. And that's why we haven't made a change in MSDs and workplaces. You'll get a display of the contributing risk factors for that task. And that's important. It's the contributing risk factors for that task. And that enables you to then to put hazard management processes in place. The nice things is we can also then create a task demands library and a return to work. One of the biggest challenges when we're returning to work from an injury or a claim is, where do you start? What is light duties? What is a job that loads the back? What is a job that loads the shoulders? What is a job that loads the necks? Once you've created a task demand libraries, you can see, well, these are the 20 tasks that do not load the back of a significant nature. So they would be the 20 tasks that someone returns to work rather than going to the GP. Oh, okay, lift things for 4 kilograms for 1 month. See you in a month and we'll go from there. Okay, next second month, do 8 kilograms. But no, you can now go with this library of tasks and say, well, these are the ones that put the greatest load in the back region in our workplace. That's important. That's our workplace, so it's relevant for that worker at that site. And what that means is you now have got a nice structured return to work rather than this sort of old-fashioned process that we used to use. So we're using the task demands library to help guide your decisions about which jobs, which tasks you do on your return to work post-injury. So it's really nice that we can then, that the data tells us that which are the light duties and we're getting versus the weight-based guidelines. That, that's existed, it still exists. We still send people to the GPs on their return to work and they still do these weight-based guidelines. We can change that now by getting this objective, accurate, reliable information. Let's talk about data in sport, because data in sport is, I'm an exercise and sports physio, and that's what we use a lot. We use a lot of data to work out, well, they should have a light week this week. They should avoid these skills. They should avoid those components. But what I want you to understand is there's all this hype around the AFL draft every year. It's a player who's turning 18 and they do a series or a battery of tests. And from that, you will then work out what are their physical capabilities. If we look at the AFL #1 picks over the last 20 years, so Nick Riewoldt was 2001, Luke Hodge was 2002, and they've both had stellar and long successful AFL careers. But if we look at some other players, Jonathan Patton in 2011, he was the #1 pick. He retired in 2021, and over 11 years, he only played 95 games. So you can do the maths. There's a lot of games per year, and he only played 95 games over an 11-year window. Tom Boyd, he was the 2013 #1 pick. He retired in 2019. He played 61 games over 7 years. And Paddy McCartan, he was the 2014 #1 pick. He's played 47 games over 6 years. So what it means is physical performance or physical parameters of the person there is no reflection in length of career or injury risk. So data based only on the physical does not guarantee a lengthy and successful career. So we need to understand that just looking at movement, and this is what the AFL draft does not tell you about risk. It tells us nothing about risk. So it's important that data by itself, physical parameters, don't tell us whether there's any risk lying within that task. And interestingly, the average AFL career is 30 games and 2.9 years. So it's brief, it's not long. Remember, we're trying to have a worker doing our job for 35 to 40 years in some cases. So how do we combine data and risk together? So is it risky to do physically challenging work? No, we want people to do stuff. We say move. If you don't move, you'll get a sore back, you'll get stiff, you'll get weak. So it's great to be in a job where you're using your body for your work, but we need to strike a balance. So we know it's risky also to not do physically challenging work. So we know sitting still is a problem. Doing heaps is a problem, and then we need to then get that middle ground. But interpreting data is vital. Should we do this or should the machines? Well, no, we like the machines doing it. We like the automation doing it because it's accurate and reliable, stops the human elements, the human biases. Remember, we're using recognized risk factor analysis. We weight the scores by injury claims, damage, and financial cost data. And that's where we get the creation of a risk score based on objective data. So we're not using people anymore. We're not using experts. And we understand it is not easy to assess risk within physical tasks, but the automation process can help that significantly, can help that make objective, accurate data decision choices. So one of the really nice things is when you've looked at a battery or a heap of tasks, so you might go into an organization and we can do, like I've been at a gold mine, we could do 20 task assessments a day. So you can do lots pretty quickly. It's a lot faster than we thought it would be. So you're a lot more time efficient doing these things. And what it means is we can then prioritize where the risks lie post-assessment. And then you can intervene and confirm changes, whether they're working or not, because not every intervention or risk control that you will put in will lower that risk score. You're hoping it will, but we're now getting objective data to make that decision. Let's try this, reevaluate, reassess, and then see if we've reduced the risk score. What we're hopefully then is getting this upstream model of care. Remember, a prevention focus. So we're creating best practice. So you're getting this cultural shift within organizations as well. You've got a workforce that's looking after its workers, and that's super, super important. And we do that, and we've had all the phrases, the zero harm, and they're super, super important. But the point is, MSDs, we haven't got on top of them. We haven't been able to change them and reduce them. So the automation process is the game changer. It's a game changer. So why do you use, sorry, I'll just grab some water. Remember what we're trying to achieve in a workplace. We're trying to, it's not a do it for one day. A lot of organizations will do task assessments at day, at week. And why? Because it's a continuous prevention improvement. You can't sit on your laurels. You've got to get better, improve, tweak, change, assess, reassess. So it's a continuous process. Remember, it's hazard management. It's not haptic management. And if we rely on haptic management, movement analysis or manual training, you're not going to change MSDs in the workplace. The organisations that we've been with, so Australia's largest postal service, they've used us for 2 years now. And they've had anywhere between, depending on the various sites, because there's a lot of sites with them around the country, a 23 to 26% less MSD claims cost per annum. And what that means is then your premium will reduce as well as associated with that, because all of a sudden your insurer loves you. They're doing a great job. So we had a home care provider and they had a large increase in low back claims. And they thought it was due to lifting and moving clients in their homes. So they asked if they engaged us and see if we could then assess what was going on. So in investigation, this was not the case. Home care providers were found to have several contributing events, which included removing and returning equipment required for the home visit from their boot. Their car seating, they're in these small little cars, so they're quite low to the ground, but they had these enormous doors. So that was the other problem. They were just a two-door car, so there was a huge reach, because some of these people were not very tall, so they had a huge reach to open the door and then to close the door. So it was these combined events of reaching forward to close and open, reaching to get the equipment in and back into the car post-home visit, and then you'd do that 6 times a day. So it actually wasn't what was happening in the home, it was external to the home. And then some of the problems also was that as a home care provider, you can't park your car in their driveway in case an ambulance needs to come. So you've got to be on the street. So sometimes instead of being right out the front, you might have a 50 to 100 meter walk. So they're carrying all this equipment. So you can see all of these scenarios line up to, oh, that's going to be quite challenging, because if you're seeing 10 people a day versus 6 a day, your exposure becomes higher. So then your risk of injury becomes higher. So we're able to then talk about, well, we need to put some changes in place based around, and it went to go to a different vehicle. That was one of the, so then we just got a different vehicle. We tried that, reassessed that, looked at them over a week, and wow, it was quite significant with respect. So sometimes it's not what you think it is. They thought all the problems with back, because traditionally that's what used to happen. You know, you'd get back problems shifting and moving patients in hospitals. But no, this was actually external to that case. So getting this assessment process underway helps you then make better decisions. Sometimes we get it wrong, as in that case, what we thought might be the answer. So in some places, we've got up to 54% reduction in reported work-related MSDs, and the claims cost reduction has been quite significant. And then we're getting manual task risk. So if we looked at, say, 100 tasks, we're able to reduce them on average by 18%. So that's really quite significant. And these are not numbers that we've made. These are numbers our clients have reported. And these, you always have to be careful with and consider it around self-reporting. But a year-by-year reduction in costs, reduced work cover premiums, you're getting hazardous manual task risk reduction. So as we alluded to in the very first slide, the risk score is a table. And depending on where that risk lies will determine what you do. So if it was above 400, that says stop. If it was less than 20, that's continue, and all those other scenarios happen in between. So it's based on the Australian Code of Practice, hazardous manual task, and the relevant international standards, which is the UK process, Health and Safety Executive Hazardous Manual Task Risk Assessment Methods. So it's aligned with that. And it's focused on the task. Remember, we are task assessing. We are not people assessing, we are task assessing. Once you've done an assessment, we will then put in some information at the end of that assessment. Now, that is what's called the adding extra information. It's a very technical name. But what that means is, say if you do a task assessment, we've filmed it for 3 minutes, but that job actually goes for 15 minutes. Well, then you'll put that in. How many times do you do that task per day? Well, we might do that 22 times a day. We might do that 6 times a day. So you put in the task repeats, the duration of the task, and the perception of load, and that's based on the Borg rating for individual perceived exertion. Because, for example, if I pick up 20 kg, I might say it's light, but someone else might say that's heavy. So that is relative, that weight, that job for that person. And then any additional information, handles, slippery box, innate material, moving, gloves, temperature, humidity, all of that additional information may contribute to elevation of the risk and therefore elevation of the risk score. So the assessment assessor inputs are put in post-assessment. Now, often what we're doing is we'll get a raw assessment and then we'll duplicate that, and you can do that on the iPad or the phone. And then you'll put in all that relevant information, and then you can create scenarios. Well, if we did that job 20 times a day, if we did it 50 times a day, if that job went for 60 minutes instead of 6 minutes, that will then give you some what ifs. And that's part of that decision-making process. What happens if we do it this amount and then we change how we do that? How do we get different people, rotate people, have a break in between. All of those things will help you to try and evaluate the task and reduce the risk score associated with that task. And the significance of these assessor inputs is really powerful because all of a sudden you're now chatting to the worker. So the assessor, whoever's doing that assessment, and the worker are doing real-time participatory ergonomic buy-in. So you're actually chatting. How do you think that? How did that feel when you did that job? Was that hard? Was that light? Was that medium? Was that heavy? We're actually getting a task assessment for that job done by that person. And sometimes you might get the same task and reassess with a different person. Or you'll have the same job at one site and the same job at a different site, and you'll get a different risk score. So why are we having problems in Albury when we have no problems in Adelaide and they're doing the same job or the same task? So that's where you're then able to then get nice central evaluation. So you can then look at these things across sites as well. Remember, we're getting a true reflection by adding in that data, by adding in that assessor inputs. And the more information we add, then the more relevant, the more sensitive, the more accurate that assessment will be for that task. So we're getting a more sensitive assessment. And that then helps you create meaningful data, because then we've got data that we can drive our decision-making around to try and intervene, to try and reduce the risk and the exposure to that person potentially developing a musculoskeletal disorder. So what's your outcome? Well, your outcome is these wonderful things are happening. You're getting better targeted risk controls. As we've alluded to, you can compare tasks across sites, because what happens is the assessor is using an iPad or iPhone. That all gets dumped into the cloud. So people in head office can see what you're doing on site. People in Adelaide can see what you're doing in Brisbane and Perth and Darwin, and you can all have a look at. So you can get your whole team. So if you're an organisation across several sites, it's really powerful. And that's where it's been great for Australia's largest postal service, because they had problems at some sites, but not others. So it was trying to work out why. And then it enabled us to then make some good decisions around reducing risk within certain sites. So what does it mean? You're getting better decision-making on your interventions. So the cloud or the portal that we use, or dashboard, is it's a great feature, because that'll then, from there, then it's where you basically do all your reporting. What it means is that the people who are doing the assessments, because that assessment is actually stored on the device, but it all gets dumped into that central portal or dashboard. So it enables everyone who needs to look at those assessments. And what happens then? You're doing this, you're talking, you're communicating. Why don't we try this? Let's do this. Let's look at that. Instantly, you're thinking, you're reevaluating, you're reassessing. You're actually trying to change. You're actually trying to get worker engagement, get assessor engagement, get decision makers involved. So you've got all top levels, medium levels, and low levels right through the organisation are all involved in the process of trying to reduce MSTs. So the direct benefits. There's some direct benefits from using joint action solutions, utilising automated task assessments. You get improved employer physical and mental health, because all of a sudden you've got a worker engaged. We were on site somewhere and we did an assessment and we looked at it. And this guy went up on a picker. He went up, I don't know, it was about 6 to 7 meters high to the ceiling, pulled down a washing machine, put it on the picker, and we looked into it and we thought, yeah, that looks pretty hard to do that, because you've got to drag it across mesh. And so the size of the mesh was quite important. It was a 50 millimeter mesh, or maybe go to a smaller mesh size, because that will then slide easier. So, but then are you going to roll that across every plant in the country? So then that becomes a cost-making decision, because all of a sudden we've been able, so then you get the different mesh. But what I'm trying to say is you've got workers talking. He said, yeah, I've had a sore back every time I do that for the last 3 weeks. Oh, hang on, I didn't know about that. Well, because people don't talk to people usually on site. So you've got this engagement that's happening straight away, because guess what? I'm doing an assessment because we want to check if you're okay, if that job's okay when you're doing that task. Are you putting yourself at risk? We want to help reduce that. And this is how we do it. So we're getting reduction in incidents and injuries. We're actually talking about and evaluating and reassessing. We're doing all these things to help lower injury claims costs, lower insurance premiums, and reduction in the incidents and injuries within workplaces. So it's really powerful. So they're the direct benefits you'll get as an organisation. The indirect is this stuff that we didn't really, that you only see over time once you start to doing it. And the really important one was the communication, morale, and job satisfaction. People were significantly happier that you're actually caring. You're actually doing things to help look after them within their workplace. And the big benefits then are you're getting a reduction in staff turnover and absenteeism. So that retraining, that stuff there where people are pulling out, and it's really difficult in times with COVID and flu, and there's lots of instability in workplaces. So having your workforce there more days than not, so they're not getting eliminated from work or reduced from work or changed or modified because of an MSD. So we're getting that reduction in staff turnover and absenteeism and training. And what's that mean? Increased productivity. You've got more people at work for more days, your productivity will increase. And you've got this really nice system now where you can do your reporting, you can have a nice audit trail, and this area around compliance, well, you're able to now meet that because we've assessed these tasks, we've put some measures in place, and we've reduced them with some risk controls. So the indirect benefits have been really quite significant across organisations that have used it for a period of time. This is just an example of once you've gone into the portal about how does, so how do I make that bigger? But this is just an example of, so green is obviously good. So these are showing high-risk tasks. What are the top 10 highest scoring tasks? What are the top 10 highest tasks for the low back, for the shoulder, for the elbow? Where you're getting two boxes, you're trying to put in risk controls, so pre and post. So you put in a risk control, what was the pre-risk score and the post-risk score, and what were the least effective risk score reductions. So you've got the 10 highest, the 10 lowest, and then we've got an overall in this graph here we're showing, so this is risk score across the top, and this is pre, and this is post. So we've got and this is month by month, because this is a 3-monthly report. And then what it's showing is that you're getting a consistent reduction in risk scores. So the right data can help you gain better understanding of the risks within hazardous manual tasks. Remember, we all acknowledge we cannot eliminate risk, but we can certainly reduce it. And we can certainly reduce it to an effective way that reduces your costs and claims associated with MSD, and you get a healthier, happier workforce because someone's caring, someone's providing an assessment tool, and you're engaging them. So everyone's actually all of a sudden talking to each other. So you're connecting people within the organisation. That's probably the most powerful thing I've found by using this tool. It's that sort of disconnect that in organisations, it doesn't happen because you've got people there that are evaluating the difficult. They're trying to make what's difficult and historically hard to do easier. And we're not an organisation that's focused on compliance. We're focused on difference. What are you trying to achieve within an organisation? Here is a tool, an automated assessment tool for hazardous manual tasks, how to reduce their risk. Well, now you can using an automated process. So it's important that, and it can be a bit hard, embrace technology. Yes, I'm of the mature athlete, as I like to call myself. And technology can make a huge difference. And this is a really good example of how it can make a difference. So embrace it. You're living in the past if you're still doing manual task assessments. You can now do automated task assessments to help reduce your MSK risks and potential hazardous manual tasks. Let's reduce them, lower them, change them. So using data can help you make better decisions around MSK risks and controls within your organisations. That's how you can find us. So my name's David Bick. There's no S, it's just David Bick, and that's our email. And you can email us at info@jointaction.solutions. We've got a UK, US representative as well. We're working in those two continents as well. And we've got people all up the eastern seaboard. I live in Brisbane. We've got some people in Sydney, some in Melbourne, country Victoria, and we're in Europe as well. Thanks, everybody. It's I hope that's helped you, and I look forward to some of the questions that are going to pop up.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. The first question came through the chat from Naren. How much does the conditioning of a person play in WMSD?
Yeah. Look, I think that's important. The aging workforce, I think that's where that question is probably, it's a big challenge for all of us in workplaces that work with physical workforce. The beauty of those less capable physically workers, they're smarter. They often know how to get around it. They'll have rest periods. They'll have a break in between. They'll go at a more gentle pace than the, but it's important. And yeah, physicality is important when you're doing a physical job. That's often why we see people struggle first week back after they've had a few weeks off work. So it's getting back into that routine, very much like pre-season training and footy. You know, that they're a bit rough and a bit sore, but if you're in a physical job, it's important that you still have some physical presence. Otherwise, it's going to become more and more challenging. So often, you know, think of the carpenter at 40, they often use into management. So, they're not on the tools anymore is often the phrase that's used. But it's a bit understanding that in the workplace, you sometimes don't have that choice. So it's how to look after your workers is important. And this is a tool that can help you do that.
So Chris asks, how is the consideration of force exertion incorporated into your system?
That's based on that perceived exertion. So once you've done that assessment, you'll ask the person who's done the task the perception of load. So was that light, was that medium, or was that heavy? And then what percentage of task did you have your hands on the object? So all those parameters. So for example, when I was at a large retail store, they would carry microwaves out to a car, and then we would put them on a trolley as a set. So then that becomes a significant less time that you're requiring to exert force by putting it on a trolley and pushing that along versus carrying the object. So, and we did that because we did that assessment, but then you plug the parameters back in, and you can see there was a huge difference in the risk score associated with. So while the trolley is a good idea, there's only one trolley in the store. You've got 6 people on sales. They're all trying to get stuff to cars at the same time. You've only got one trolley. So guess what? Management, buy trolleys. But that's that sort of cost process that's a bit of a challenge in workplaces, about sometimes buying simple things to actually help your worker get less exposed and therefore less likely to develop an MSD.
Thank you. Claire says, hi, David, fantastic presentation. How do we further encourage that chat and ensure that people, men especially, don't think that injury or pain equals weakness, so they're more free to speak out and look after themselves? Yeah, look, I think it's important, Claire, that we really, so in this, if I go back to the sporting arena, every morning in the sporting arena, we would get people to fill out a wellness chart. Look, how'd you sleep? How do you feel today? How do you think you'll train today? Any issues happening in your personal life? Because you could have got a message, but we don't ask that in the workplace. So I think it's really important. So that's where sometimes those opportunities in a toolbox meeting, or in some places we'll do a 5-second get your head ready for work. So I often talk to people about, you've got to physically prepare, but how do you do that? By mentally tuning in. Unless you actually connect your brain to your body, you're going to find your work difficult. So it's important to understand, if you're feeling flat, I feel like crap today. I don't feel that myself, but I still got to work. One of the kids has thrown up overnight. I've had an interrupted sleep, but I still go to work. But they're the days I need to understand that, whoa, just slow down, just take your time, just look after yourself today. And it's really important. As men, we're terrible, but let's look after each other. That's really important. So I would always encourage your health and safety people to keep the chat up. That's really important. So we've also got a comment here, very informative. Thank you. Is Jazz a subscription-based service or a one-off cost?
It's a monthly subscription. So it depends if you want it it's the same cost per month. And so, yeah, and sometimes we do projects. So with one of Australia's largest retailer, we're just doing a 5-day project where I just go to different sites and we do an assessment, and that's a flat fee and a one-off cost, because sometimes you're not too sure how the system works, and we get that. So some people just like to
dip their foot in the water, see how it works, and then from there, okay, we'll buy it, and that's usually 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, whatever you want to do. Pre-work warm-up exercises. Look, I think if people, I don't like that generic thing where everyone's doing the same thing. I like people to, I feel stiff here, what do I need to do? So we try and understand that there's some sort of team approach, but there's some things that you need to do specifically for your body. They're the things that you need to do. So the one thing that I really do like a pre-work warm-up is it gets people talking and thinking and preparing for work. So I like that as well. I like people, because I like people sort of understand that there's just a couple of things you can do like that, rotation, squeeze your shoulder blades together. But what are you doing? You're actually tuning your brain in and starting the day as well. And I think one of the big problems is they're too long. You can really do it all in 3 to 5 minutes max. So if you're spending 15 minutes to pre-work warm-up, no, too long. 3 to 5 minutes, dynamic, quick, get moving, tune in, wake up.
Okay, so lots of questions. Chris asks, nice presentation, David. When you're assessing the task and not the person, depending on what the person, won't there be a specific difference when you're assessing a
Yeah, there will, Chris, because part of that,
man
when
and a woman, for example, lifting a heavy load, won't this show outliers when it comes?
Yeah, no, it will, because part of that's why we've got the same job done by 2 different people, and this place we used a man and a woman. It doesn't necessarily, it can be young and an old worker, or experienced or inexperienced, and the perception of load by the one person is going to be a lot higher than the other. But what the data shows is that it's trying to then, it will quantify that. So you actually, while the perception is you think that it's going to be significantly harder for the person who is perceived weaker, well, it didn't actually change the risk score. It was certainly higher, but it wasn't a significant change. There was one job where they really struggled with. So what that means is that job needs to be done differently by that person. So don't carry that object. You just need to put it on a trolley. So yeah, there is, but that's the whole idea of that assessment is for that person. So then we can then look at that same task done by a couple of different people. So that can be a nice training tool as well. Induction training tools. We can then get people to evaluate that.
Nikki says, thanks, David. How do you account for objectivity with different people performing the same task as everyone uses their body differently? Is subscription based on headcount, users, or number of tasks assessed?
I'll answer the last question first. No, you can do 1,000 assessments a day. You can take the thing to different sites. You can do whatever you like. So it's just a monthly subscription. That's it. So whether you use it on 500 people or 50 people, it does not matter. And there is no, so there's no limitation. So headcount, users, number of tasks, irrelevant. It's just a monthly subscription. Do whatever you like, knock your socks off. How do you account for objectivity with different people? Well, that's where, so we did a thing the other day where we're lifting 85 centimeter TVs. So do you have your feet side by side? Do you have your feet in a stance position? Because the grips on these things, and it's a 2-man lift, the grips on these things. So we then looked at that simple task. How did you find that? How did you find that? So it was just changing your feet position, got feedback to then try, okay, so maybe you need to standardize it. So yes, that's where what we're trying to then put in, okay, split stance versus feet together. Maybe that's the way we need to do it, is a split stance, because it was really quite significant, the difference in that. That's the perception of load. They felt the load was really heavy when they had feet side by side, but it became light when they had a split stance because they could just get their one foot past the object. So it made quite a difference. So that's then teaching you that a lifting technique in this case was done in 2 ways, and we objectively evaluated that there is one way that they should be doing that when it comes to that object.
Okay, Michael says, how many assessments should be taken on a task to draw a reasonable, confident conclusion regarding the risk, considering most employees may rate the exertion differently depending on fitness levels, age, etc.?
Well, it's one assessment per task. So a task can be, so this was picking up an 85 centimeter TV. So that really, and we were transferring that up onto a wave, which is a device that they would then take the machine out to the car when people would pick that up. So it's really just doing one assessment on a task. You can do, because a task can be anything. It needs to be at least a minute long, but it can be, most tasks are anywhere between that 1 to 10 minutes long. So they're not very long because they'll go from multiple tasks. And a task is completed when there is this is all based on the code of practice, when there is a 1 minute rest or stop period, then it becomes a new task. So if you stop for 1 minute, task is finished. The cost of the monthly subscription, send us an email and we do trials. We do a lot of trials, Chris. That's the most common thing we're probably doing now. A lot of organizations just buy it post trial or post evaluation because it's new. It's how does it work? We are very different to previous creators out there. So that's why there was a question around assessments. No, we just want you to use it. We want you to knock your socks off and do as much as you want.
Okay. There's a lot of comments coming through the chat as well. There's something from Jane about if you've done any work in the restraint of persons, prisoners. This is recognised as hazardous manual handling. In this task, the weight, height, strength of the non-compliant person is a huge variable, as is the environment that the restraint occurs. Now, how would this information translate to prevention of injury, given the extreme variables and the nature of the task?
That's a very long. Was that from Jane? Just wondering if any of the work can be done in restraint of a person or prisoner. No, we've done nothing in prisons, but I imagine that would be. That's where you then backfill the data and talk about those things with respect to restraints, because you'll have a notes section within, and then there's clearly some scenarios that are fairly unique, and that will help you, because that help you identify these are the contributing factors to this task, restraints. But no, we haven't done anything with respect to prisons.
Just a couple more things that seem to be coming up. Can the technology be used in hazardous areas where the atmosphere could be flammable, whether they're intrinsically safe? And also another comment about, does the data feed rely on Wi-Fi? The
sensors are intrinsically safe and they're certified. We've used them in explosive environments.
No, they're not intrinsically certified.
Oh, not intrinsically safe.
No, they're used in explosive environments as UEE, that's uncertified electrical equipment, which is signed off by the mine manager. And in the case of gas plants, the assessor is required to carry a gas detector with them when they're doing the assessments. They are used in explosive environments in many cases, but they're not certified intrinsically safe sensors.
Sorry, I didn't read that correctly. Yep, thank you.
All right.
And sorry, to answer the Wi-Fi one, the sensors capture the data and then that stream using Bluetooth LTE to an iPad or iPhone. If there's no communication happening between the two of those, that's okay. The sensors will connect later on and download. So it streams live to the device or can download later on. And then that iPad or iPhone can connect to the internet at a later time to upload the data to the central portal, but you get the reports immediately through the iPad or the iPhone because the processing occurs live in the app.
Chris Bukowski, you've asked how we involved with Longitude 6. They're a seller of our equipment. They're a seller of our processing system. That's how that works.
Okay. Buried up far in the chat is a link to a survey for webinars. If you're interested, just a quick survey, find out what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. And also a link somewhere up there for the next webinar, which is actually a MIOSH webinar on critical control management. I'll put that in now. Otherwise, I think that's all the questions. And I'm just going to paste this in, copy. Okay, so thank you so much, Dave. It looks like that was good, excellent knowledge, a lot of nice comments there. So,
thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, I think there's a lot of people probably interested in contacting you for pricing and other questions. So there's that email address there. That'll also be on the email later today that we send out with a link to the podcast and the recording. So thank you, Gary, for helping to answer those questions too. Nice to meet you. And yeah, hopefully we can hear from you again, David. It might be nice to see this in action, have a live webinar.
Oh yeah, we could do that easily. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be good. So you can have it all happening and have the assessment happening at the same time. It'd be great to see.
That's a good idea. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.